Looking to see what's happening around your home? Ring's battery doorbell helps you track packages and see who's at your door in real time. The Outdoor Cam Plus protects your yard at night with a wide field of view and clearer Retinal 2K video. Or upgrade to 4K cameras and doorbells with Retinal Vision for ultra-clear zoom and detail. Your door, your yard, your home. With Ring, it's protected. Shop cameras, doorbells, and more at ring.com now.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is $2.50, so you can get your gym gains on. Or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Steve Simmons.
Steve Simmons, Toronto Sun, for Keith. You talk about the due diligence that you did on John prior to hiring him and now hiring him. In the past, say, 3 to 4 days, I have been in contact with about 20 people who work in the National Hockey League, many of whom are prominent names that we would all know. And of the 20 people I spoke to, one was supportive of John's hiring, and the other 19 thought it was a sham, to be perfectly honest. Words were used like con artist, liar, salesman. How did you come to a different conclusion that I was able to come to in a very short time?
I must have talked to different people.
That's it? Because I'm telling you, the hockey world today is astounded by this announcement.
Okay.
And your response to that?
Is we've conducted due diligence, and it was deep due diligence. It was a thorough process, and I'm quite happy with where we've landed.
Hello, and welcome to a very special presentation of Master Leaf Theater by Islanders Anxiety. Today, we are calling this episode The Talented Mr. Chayka, which is a reference to the 1955 novel by Patricia Highsmith, The Talented Mr. Ripley, which has been adapted to TV series and movies many times over the many years. And it's about a guy with questionable character that takes on another guy's identity, gets away with murder a couple of times. I don't think that the Maple Leafs' newest general manager will go quite that far, but Michael Leboff, the events of the last week in Leafland must be addressed, and there's no better place to do that than here at Master Leaf Theater. I know you're ready for this. I'm ready for this. I can't wait to get started.
Yeah, I gotta say, the two of the most memorable Master Leaf Theaters we've done, and we've been at this now a long time.
Yeah.
Don't know what season of the spinoff this is, but it's got to be like 4 or 5. But yeah, the two of the most memorable episodes that I can remember, and I should remember them all, but I don't because I am part of them, had to do with press conferences, right? There was the famous Kyle Dubas press conference, the one, I don't know if you'll remember this, but one time Kyle Dubas, after the Maple Leafs got eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs, had a press conference to say, I don't know if I want to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs much longer.
Right.
And then he got fired the next day for saying, I don't know if I want to be the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs much longer. And everybody was incredibly confused. And it spawned one of the all-time great readings of Master Leaf Theater by Jonas Siegel, when he talked about how the Maple Leafs front office was grief-stricken and surprised by the firing of somebody who said, I don't know if I want to do this job anymore, in front of national television cameras and his bosses.
Yeah.
And then there was another press conference a couple of years later. The reason we do Master Leaf Theater is because a rivalry had spawned between Islander fans and the Maple Leafs because of one John Tavares. And we're bitter. We were bitter about it. We're still bitter about it. We're going to be bitter about it till our graves. And it made us, really become maybe unhealthily obsessed with the going on, as you said, the goings on in Leafland and the media and how it works up there. And it's just the bizarre nature of it. And when John Tavares was stripped of his captaincy, that was a huge moment for us in this long war that we've been waging, a huge battle. You can maybe akin to the Battle of Saratoga, turning point of the war. and they had a press conference, and would you believe it, John Tavares' kids showed up in hockey jerseys for a different player on the hockey team, the one that was taking the seat from him.
Right.
And so those two press conferences, I remember both those episodes thinking it just won't get any better, more bizarre, sweeter than that. Despite what just happened on ESPN, I was wrong. I was very wrong, because what transpired on Monday afternoon, and it wasn't at the Ford Performance Center. I was gonna call it the Ford Performance Theater, where Abraham Lincoln was shot. The Ford Performance Center. It was at the Real Bar Sports Bar and Grill, the Real Sports Bar and Grill, which is an MLSE owned bar. Whatever happened yesterday was among the most entertaining, dysfunctional, sweet things I've ever watched in my life, and I'm really excited to get into that, to get into the build up to that with some stuff. And the people, there were not many up there in this media echo chamber that had all their marbles, but there were a lot of marbles lost over these past 20 days or so, and it culminated with what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it's safe to say that no team does bizarre press conferences better than the Leafs do. And like you said, we're doing our third or fourth Master Leaf Theater this season. This is the first season we've actually broken them out into like special episodes. Like, we've done them during the summer because there's really not much else to do, but this is the first time that we had so much material that putting it at the end of an episode of Islanders Anxiety seemed to kind of be giving it short shrift, and we wanted to give it the time that it deserved. And so we've broken them out into standalone episodes that, believe it or not, get the same amount of traffic as Islanders Anxiety. So for those of you who are listening, I really appreciate it. I'm always like, I don't know how many people really get this joke, but the answer is a lot of people. And so we really do appreciate them, because we have a lot of fun with these. And this is another great press conference to throw on the fire. By the way, you forgot to mention that the press conference with John Tavares' kids wearing Austin Matthews' jersey came after you and I had joked that they were going to put his kids in Austin Matthews jerseys in this sort of like weird kind of Handmaid's Tale-y, kind of thing. And that's exactly what they did. So again, nobody does it like the Leafs do it. However, you just alluded to something that happened on ESPN moments ago, and we should address that right here before we get into the readings for tonight's Master Leaf Theater. And that is that the Leafs, against all odds, or perhaps with the favor of the NHL, depending on what you believe, have won the 2026 NHL Draft Lottery. They'll be picking first at the end of June at the draft. Gavin McKenna, the forward from Penn State, is considered the number one pick. There's guys like Ivar Stenberg and Keaton Verhoff, and some good players at the top of this thing, but I think McKenna at this point is still the number one prize. This is a little bit of a wrench for us, because we were hoping to laugh at the Leafs' downfall. But honestly, the events of the last week need to be addressed and need to be dramatized here on Master Leaf Theater. And so the Leafs winning the draft lottery doesn't do anything to, dissuade us from doing this. However, that being said, it does suck that people are going to be happy for a little while that they won this lottery. But as I've been telling people, this is not a guarantee of anything. And you could just ask the New York Rangers, who were supposed to be a juggernaut by now, with Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere and a few other guys at the top of their roster, and that has not materialized. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I'm over worrying about other people's draft picks, because there's a way. If there's a way to screw it up, they'll find it. So very quickly on the Leafs draft win, your thoughts, and before we move on here.
Yeah, I mean, originally I was like, it sucks, whatever. But now I'm starting to take a different angle of it, which is, we're gonna be reading a lot and listening to a lot about the concern of the people driving the bus.
Yes.
It's not a good thing, but the fact that this regime is in charge at a moment where they'll be picking first overall, and then have to find a way to keep their team together. Otherwise, this guy's just going to be sort of rotting as the team kind of falls apart around him in a rebuild. I mean, I'm just very happy. Like, it's not that we don't have like a steady pair of hands on the wheel, right?
Right.
For this. So, that's the the angle I'm choosing to think. And yeah, as you said, like, it doesn't change the fact that what transpired on Monday and the build up to Monday and how much material we're going to get out of the talented Mr. Chayka Chronicles. It doesn't change that at all. And so as sorry as I am that happened, as all great narratives have, there are twists that you don't see coming, and this is one of them.
Yes.
And we'll just see how it plays out, because there's nothing we could do about it now except try our best to laugh through laugh through it, and we're gonna do a lot of that tonight, and I can't wait. And we have as you said, a smorgasbord, whatever you want to say it, call it, of readings, of audio clips, one of which you've already heard.
Yes.
You and I both have families and jobs, and I was essentially like jamming my day to make sure I got to as much of this stuff as I could.
Right.
And look, if somebody wants to swoop in here and finds this bit to be worthy of a 7 or 8 figure sponsorship, by all means. If the Real Sports Bar and Grill wants to throw us a sponsorship for a couple seasons so we can make this our full-time job, but it felt like it for a little bit. I was like, every second I had, I was trying to listen, read, get it all together, because there was so much of it. There really was so much of it to get through over these past few days. And there's a lot on the cutting room floor, as well. So there's a few Master Leaf Theater icons who weren't even up to snuff to get involved on this to make the cut. And you'll see why, because the stuff that we're dealing with tonight it's fast, 99 mile per hour fastball after 99 mile per hour fastball.
It is catching a moving train, in the words of the talented Mr. Chayka himself, actually. But it's really funny. And we're going to get to it in a minute. But I did think you mentioned just now something that I kind of thought of, which is like, it would be ironic if the Leafs lottery win ends up getting kind of more ears on this episode, because people are going to be kind of like feasting for Leaf stuff. And if this is your first time listening, this is a product of Islanders Anxiety. My name is Dan. That is Mike. We do our show every week for Islanders fans. We also do a spinoff called Weird Islanders, the podcast, where we talk about guys who only played for the Islanders for a little bit. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety, with even more Master Leaf Theater as well there. And if the Real Sports Bar and Grill wants us to do a live reading of Master Leaf Theater, we'll come up there, we'll bring some friends, do some readings. I think it would be a lot of fun. But this is a wealth of stuff here. A couple of things could have been Master Leaf Theaters on their own, but we did jam them together. And for about an hour or so, I was working after work today to kind of make this, shape this into what you're about to hear. And I told my wife, who was, in the room next to me, I'm like, I do a lot of work for this one bit, so I hope people really enjoy this, because it took a lot of pruning, because there's so much here, because it has been, like you said, quite a ride for the last couple of weeks. So no more intros. Let's get to it. We're going to have 10 readings, I believe, here today, which is a lot for us, some longer than others, from a wide variety of sources. They're all great. I'm going to put the links out for these so you can find them and read them yourself. They're definitely all worth checking out, because they are something. Let me tell you, it tells a tale that I don't think we're going to forget anytime soon. And we're going to start tonight at a place where we normally do start, and that is The Athletic. And this is from an article from all the way back on April 15th, 2026. See if you could remember that far back. And it's the perfect opening for us. And normally we would pick one person from The Athletic to read. But today, this article was so huge, it took 3 writers to craft it. Jonas Siegel, Chris Johnston, James Myrtle, all of whom have been featured on Master Leaf Theater before. And this is an article that, I don't know if went viral is the right word, but got a lot of play last month because it was a deep dive into the way the Leafs are run and the man who is at the top of the food chain, who we're going to hear a lot about tonight. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment CEO Keith Pelly. He comes from a broadcast background. He's worked with the PGA Tour, or whatever it is, a Canada Tour, whatever it is. So he comes from the TV and golf world, and now he has been thrust into this hockey world, and frankly is not having a very good time, although he sure did tonight, I guess, but we're going to forget about that. Anyway, this article, again, got a lot of traction when it came out, and it's called Inside the Stunning Fall of the Maple Leafs: Chaos, Dysfunction, and AI by Jonas Siegel, Chris Johnston, and James Myrtle. This article opens with this year's trade deadline, in which the Maple Leafs war room had a special visitor in Keith Pelly. And it starts like this. Seldom does a finely tailored suit from the C-suite rub shoulders directly with scouts who spent hundreds of days pounding the pavement each year looking for players. But there was Keith Pelly, the president and CEO of MLSE, overseeing the action. Pelly had never taken that approach with the NBA's Toronto Raptors or MLS's Toronto FC, the two other big league clubs he oversees, nor had he been in the room on trade deadline day a year earlier, when Brendan Shanahan was still the president of the Leafs. But he was concerned by the direction the team was taking under general manager Brad Treliving and felt it necessary to get a first-hand view at how the front office operated under pressure and arrived at decisions. Pelly viewed himself as merely an observer, but others there felt differently. He didn't sit in silence. He peppered the team's scouts with questions, demanded more assets in trade conversations, and tossed out opinions and ideas. As one team source put it, fans would have been surprised to see just how involved a non-hockey executive was that day. Pelly didn't come empty-handed either. He had notes that included possible trade returns that Leaf staff members believed were generated by large language models and artificial intelligence, tools that have been increasingly influential at the top of MLSE and hadn't been part of the usual process with its NHL team. Pelly later brushed away any suggestion that he tried to use AI to influence the Leafs' deadline approach when questioned by The Athletic. What he witnessed that day, however, was a front office that to him appeared disorganized and directionless. I'm going to let y'all guys in on a little secret. That article right there, and that's just the lead from the article, I thought could have been its own Master Leaf Theater. We could have read the whole thing on an episode, but of course the Athletic's lawyers would have had it out for us because it's behind a paywall. But this article, I think I read it like maybe 2 or 3 times. Like, it was incredible, the depth that these guys found and all the ways that Keith Pelly, like all the places he had his fingers in it. Maybe a lot of it was BS, but it was very entertaining and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yep. Yeah. And the fallout from it was almost as enjoyable as reading it the first time. Cause every line was just
right
better than the last. And it painted this dystopian corporate hockey team. And then you got to listen to, real Kipper and Bourne, when the article came out, and Kipper said something that we say all the time, which is, how many people do you need to write this, an article? And he's like, there's 3 writers and 20 sources on this.
Yeah.
And, which is astonishing, in a lot of different ways. And what I love about it is that, they obviously got some great sourcing from inside the team. And that means that basically everybody's just like, what on earth who is this guy? What is he doing? He's giving off like, I would say like 4 or 5 months ago, maybe before the season, people started to like have their antenna up for this guy. And James Dolan is a different kind of owner, I would say, but he's meddlesome. Jerry Jones is as well. Like, these are meddlesome owners. Obviously, Tom Dundon is the owner / GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, which we know. And Eric Tulsky's just there to, kind of run his mail around. But you could see some people start to like wonder of this guy. Think of Pelly, who's not the owner, by the way. He's the middleman between the owner and MLSE. In like these kind of ways, and the tide had really started to turn on him. We read on previous episodes of Master Leaf Theater, we talked about how CJ, the day that Keith Pelly signed on, was like lapping him up. He was like, "This guy's gonna be great. Change the tide of the team, and he's a real boss with like real credentials, and the buck stops with him." And that all changed, and then this article kind of just laid it all out to bear. And it's honestly read through it and got a little frightened myself, just for like the state of where we are in like just society in general and sports for sure. That this kind of guy is running a team like this. Like, this isn't This isn't it's not the New York Islanders. It's not the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Right.
This is the Toronto Maple Leafs. So this guy was able to, corporate BS his way all the way to the top of not just the Maple Leafs, but all these sports properties. And that's a little frightening, but that it's happening to the Leafs was just hilarious. And I loved the idea of this was all spawned from another press conference we should note, which was when Keith Pelly met after they fired Brad Treliving and was like mentioning different Canadians prospects and Sabres prospects. And it was clear that whatever large language model the MLSE employs inside their intranet spit those guys out at him. And it's he's vehemently denied that he had an AI co-pilot with him in trade deadline meetings, both in when reached for this article, plus again during the now famous press conference. So it really struck a chord, and this is a great place to start, because I think it really sets the tone for what these writers, who are definitely not Leafs fans, we need to stress all the time that Jonas Siegel and James Myrtle are not Toronto Maple Leafs. They might have a Toronto Maple Leafs fan podcast. They might high five after Austin Matthews goals, but they are not Leaf fans. So like these guys have it out for Keith Pelly, and this article was them planting a flag right in the ground as we hurled towards the big decisions that he had to make with the help of Neil Glassberg.
Yes, the headhunting firm that would head up the search for the next Maple Leafs general manager. We actually won't get to a ton of Neil Glassberg stuff here, but they are kind of a player in the background. But yeah, no, I mean, this was this article was great, and again, it just shows a man who has been very successful in many other avenues in life, for sure, being woefully out of his depth in a sport that he doesn't understand, a team he doesn't understand, in a environment that distrusts him, to be blunt. I can't imagine these Leaf scouts had a whole lot of nice things to say about Keith Pelly when he comes into the room and is like, hey, how about getting Michael Hage from the Canadiens? Like, what are you talking about? Get out of here, So the whole thing was hilarious. The AI aspect of it is even more just sort of a cherry on top of the whole thing. And of course, the fact that he denied all that just makes it even better. But yeah, so this whole thing comes after, months of the firing of Treliving, another weird press conference where they kind of announced this. Pelly is forming this adversarial relationship with the Maple Leafs media, who keep asking him really legitimate questions, and then he just refuses to answer, basically. So I highly recommend reading the rest of the article, because it is absolutely amazing, and we could sit here and do this for 3 hours, but we got to move on to other things. So after this press conference and after this article, the Leafs still need a GM and possibly a president, because they need somebody at the helm who can actually run the team and build its next iteration. And so who should that person be? Well, there's a big wide world out there, and the Leafs, could look anywhere, really. And so we get to another article by The Athletic. This was by one of those writers, Jonas Siegel. We're going to hear from again later. And it's called Maple Leafs Should Aim High with Their Next Head of Hockey Operations. And that's pretty much the whole point of the article. Do you want to take this one? Because I feel like this is a good one.
Sure. As you said, this is by Jonas Siegel, who is the Charles Dickens, right? Is he the Charles Dickens of Master Leaf Theater? So, and I got to say that Jonas is he's at the tip of the vanguard in the the battle against Keith Pelly, because we'll get into the politics of it all throughout, because it's certainly there's a lot of allegiances being formed amongst rival media companies, and it's been great. But without further ado, here, take it away, Jonas. With so much at stake in this franchise-defining offseason, the Leafs should shoot their shot. The top of their wish list would probably start with 49-year-old Julien Brisebois, the vice president GM and alternate governor of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Would Brisebois have any interest in leaving the Lightning, where he's won 2 Stanley Cups, to join the rival Leafs? Perhaps not. The Leafs could try to sway him anyway by offering to make him president and GM of Toronto, boosting his title, in other words, while also making him the highest paid executive in the sport. Maybe he still says no. Or maybe the Lightning simply promote him to president when word of the Leafs' interest comes their way. and they up his salary along with it. If not Brisebois, then the Leafs could look to poach Colorado Avalanche general manager Chris MacFarland. Joe Sakic is president of hockey ops with the Avs. The Leafs could make MacFarland promoted to GM after Colorado's Cup in 2022, number 1 on the call sheet in Toronto, with the money to match. If that doesn't work, why not take a run at Kelly McCrimmon, the GM under President George McPhee with the Vegas Golden Knights? Or what about Eric Tulsky, the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, who Pelly spoke so highly of at that infamous press conference earlier this month?
It goes without saying that all the people mentioned in this little snippet here of this article, Brisebois, McFarland, McCrimmon, even Tulsky, who is the only one of these guys to not have won a cup, but he's put together some good teams. All these people are highly successful. And Jonas's whole thing is, well, why don't you just go grab one? Like, and this is the kind of thing that like Jonas has been hammering on the Leafs Report podcast and other places. You just got to put smart people in charge. And to Jonas, the smart people are working for other teams. And so you got to grab one and put him in charge of your team. And what I love about this particular section here is like, he keeps saying, well, what if they made this guy who's a vice president, the president? They can make him the president of the Leafs. Maybe this guy who's, you know, a vice president will now be president and GM. And I'm thinking, why would that matter? Like, I don't even know. Like, who knows if these titles even matter to these guys outside of like what's printed on their business card. So it just seems very presumptuous that A, the Leafs could have their pick of whatever, you know, GM or president in the league they want. And B, that these guys would move their entire family to Toronto just for one less word in their title. Like, I just don't know if it really matters.
It's this is a very Leafs and Rangers disease is a strong word, but it's like something that their fan bases and like media spheres do more than anybody and maybe all sports. It almost reminds me of like the Yankees in like the early 2000s, except the Yankees would go do it. George Steinbrenner would be like, hey, that Jason Giambi guy's really good. Let's go get him. And then guess what? You'd wake up the next morning and who's on the front page of Newsday? Jason Giambi in a Yankees jersey.
And actually, to keep that going, the Yankees, as far as I know, and I'm not like a huge baseball guy, but the Yankees, as far as I know, are the only team in Major League Baseball that makes a big deal about who their captain is. Oh, this Derek Jeter's the captain. Don Mattingly was the captain. Does any other team have a captain in baseball? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I've never heard of one.
No. Yeah, and now we're getting to see that the only team in sports that makes a big deal about the org chart that is sent around after moves is the Maple Leafs, because I haven't heard the word hierarchy. I've heard that word more in the past week than I have in my entire life. Everybody wants to know the hierarchy, and that's what Jonas is going at here too, which is, well, you know, maybe Chris MacFarland wants to move up a step on the org chart. One problem, Jonas, Chris MacFarland's team is playing right now in the Stanley Cup playoffs, as is Kelly McCrimmon's. Julian Brisebois' team just was eliminated the other day. George McPhee and Eric Tulsky. Everyone mentioned in this, they're all playing, or except for Brisebois, and they were just like, yeah, no, just, you know, maybe during the intermission, Jonas is thinking, like, just see if maybe Keith Pelly could just go to the game at Amalie Arena and see if he can get up to the booth. And they kept, James Myrtle kept referring to it as a bully offer. Like, they can make a bully offer to this guy. No, these guys all have contracts. Like, you know, it's not like a normal thing where everyone's just like an at-will employee and somebody, you know, headhunt to. This is a different thing. Yeah, you can get word to them, of course, and you can try to sweeten the pot to the owners, but something tells me that the owners of the Colorado Avalanche probably are like, talk to us in like either 2 weeks or never again, because we're in the middle of a playoff race. Like, and you don't have that much time to wait for Chris MacFarland. And so I love this. I love this theme that these two guys have had. And it used to be, they used to talk about, they talk this way about players, of course, as I was mentioning, like, I think during the summer, James Myrtle was just like, yeah, you know what, they should be calling Matthew Darsh and seeing what if he'd be willing to go to Bo Horvat and get him, you know, and like they already traded Noah Dobson, so maybe kick tires on Bo Horvat and get him up to Toronto. Yeah, it's not how it works. Like, these people have, as you said, like families and they're entrenched there and all that. And there's also the fact of everybody just watched the guy who would be their boss with his blue glasses do a press conference where he was talking about Radim Merka and Michael Hage, and was like, do you think Julian Brisebois wants to be working with that guy?
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, maybe. One other theme that we need to mention here too is that the Maple Leafs fired Brendan Shanahan, and that decision was met with a lot of "I told you so." I was right. He had to go from these people who are reading from today. And now they've all completely changed their tune, which is like, I was the one who didn't, maybe firing, I was saying Brendan Shanahan, they need to get a president. This could be a mistake. I'm like, well, no, you guys were all, Brendan Shanahan fired your friend Kyle Dubas a couple years ago because Kyle Dubas, once again, held a press conference himself where he said he didn't know if he wants to work for Brendan Shanahan's company. And you guys were bitter about it. Finally, Shanahan got his. And they all celebrated, but now they're all like, who's in charge here? You know? and that's part of what's going on here. It's like, do you think Julian Brisebois would say no to Brendan Shanahan? Yeah. Probably not as quickly as Keith Pelly. So that's just another thing to remember here.
Yeah, it's again, like you said, it's a very rare form of, again, and I don't know, disease is the right word. It's like a real rare mindset among people, because like, Islanders fans generally aren't like, even if an Islanders fan is like, they should go trade for McDavid. Usually they're joking. Like, it's not like, nobody really takes that seriously. But I feel like a Leafs fan is probably, there have been multiple, like, here's how the Leafs can trade for McDavid, like, that are for real, that are sincere. And this is exactly that. And again, Jonas and James Myrtle on their podcast have talked about this a lot. Like, just go get one of these guys. And Myrtle's guy is Tulsky. Like, he definitely wants Tulsky to run the Leafs, but again, he's got a job. He's probably doing a fine job. I don't think he's any danger of leaving there. But these guys all think that they're just a phone call away. And now a word from our sponsors. VintageIceHockey.com. Over 100 classic hockey logos on t-shirts, jerseys, hats, mugs, and more. Long Island Ducks, Albany Riverettes, Danbury Trashers, Kentucky Thoroughblades, and so many more. Plus a full line of Islanders Anxiety merch, with our portion of the sales going directly to the Center for Dementia Research. These incredible items cannot be found in stores, so shop VintageIceHockey.com today. Relax, sit back, and enjoy wine from The Pinot Project. Rosé, Pinot Grigio, or a Pinot Noir that was named a Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. These wines are delicious, affordable, and available at area wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. And please, drink responsibly. As the search, time period went on, like we said, the Leafs contracted this Neil Glassberg firm to kind of find people for the job. They interviewed a whole bunch of them. We're going to get to that in a few minutes when we talk about today's or the press conference from this week. And it all of a sudden became obvious that none of those guys were coming. Brisebois and the McCrimmons and McFarlands, those guys, they weren't here. And all of a sudden, a new group of guys emerged, guys who are either assistant general managers in some cases. There's a guy named Scott White who is an assistant general manager in Dallas. I believe Ryan Martin, who was an assistant GM with the Rangers, got maybe interviewed. Maybe it was Vancouver. I don't remember. I think Ryan Bonus, and that was Vancouver too, who's with the Islanders. But like, they started talking to these types of people, but also, which is, normal for this type of thing. That's how the Islanders got Matthew Darche. But also they started talking to people who haven't been in the NHL in quite some time. Mike Gillis was on that list. He was last GM of the Vancouver Canucks 10 years ago. And one of them was our main character for this evening, one John Chayka, who you may remember as being the general manager of the then the Arizona Coyotes about 10 years ago. He was 26 years old when he was first named GM of the Coyotes, who, of course, we don't need to tell you, had all kinds of ownership problems for years and years and years until finally they pulled up stakes and left for Utah, left their entire history behind because the NHL can't quit Arizona. They'll get another team eventually, probably. But it was a shit show from the beginning, and John Chayka was the general manager there for a while. He abruptly quit just before the playoffs started one year, and was later, in fact, suspended by the NHL for improperly measuring prospects, which is against the rules. He also was doing some stuff trying to get another job with the Devils at one point, and another team, I think, too, that also got him in trouble with the league. So this guy does not have a distinguished record as an NHL GM, has run afoul of the league multiple times, and then disappeared. And for the last 6 years has been running various Wendy's franchises in Canada and Tim Hortons that his family owns. He also has a wife, and they have 3 kids together. So for him to pop up as the lead candidate for the Maple Leafs GM job struck a few people as very, very strange. And so this is not only where we meet John Chayka for the first time, but it also is where we meet our story's unlikely hero. You talked about twists and turns before. Well, let me tell you, there is no twist that anybody saw coming less than Steve Simmons being the hero of the story. Who is Steve Simmons? Well, he is a longtime Leafs reporter. He is a very old school sports reporter in the sense that he is a crotchety, cranky old man that loves to get on people's cases about, the newfangled this, that, and the other thing. But that being said, he has a point when it comes to John Chayka. How would you describe Steve Simmons? Like, he's very much cut from the cloth of a guy that you and I both care about very much, Stan Fischler. Like, he's very much cut from that same cloth. I would call him a muckraker, but that involves like doing a lot of work, which I don't think Steve is really into. But he's sort of like that. Like, he loves a hot take. He loves to get on people's cases. And a lot of times he is mistaken. He got on Phil Kessel's case for enjoying a good hot dog or two from a cart outside of his apartment. But this is a guy who is a dying breed. Like, you don't really get reporters like this anymore. And, as crazy as it seems, I still do read Steve Simmons every once in a while because he's got the notes column and stuff. But how would you describe Steve Simmons?
I think you did a good job. He's like a firebrand. He's old school is a great way to put it. The advent of Twitter and hockey Twitter, and then like the blog boom, he was sort of pitted against these
young guys,
the younger folks, who are writing these blogs, who are trying to, Steve Simmons was never a gatekeeper, but like that's what he was painted as, and it became this like weird thing now that you look back on it. It's like incredibly high schoolish from basically everybody involved, where like Steve Simmons and like the Jim Mathesons of the world were like labeled as like almost like pariahs to progress, and then they were constantly kind of mimicked and made fun of and dunked on, so like they got mad about all that at the up and comers. And I will say that everybody basically was wrong in the entire situation. But nobody's behavior was covered themselves in glory. But I will say, like you, like there's a certain spark that he has and talent that he has. And I mean, we can also just put it this way, like he's got cojones, and that makes him a must read in times like this. And one of the funny things about Master Leaf Theater is he was one of the first ones to sort of turn on Tavares.
Yes.
He was a couple years behind Nick Kypreos, who turned on John Tavares the day that John Tavares signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But and that put Steve Simmons, as you said, he turned into this like kind of unlikely protagonist of this whole thing. And this is like his, was it Samwise Gamgee kind of situation where you're starting to see like he's actually the, Frodo is getting he's the face of it. Maybe like Jonas and the Athletic boys and CJ, like they might be Frodo here, but Samwise is, without Samwise, you're not getting to a happy ending. And so Steve really, he brings it here, and he's been bringing it since this happened. And you can't understate enough how, not even out of left field, but I think I'm going to use the word dystopian again, how dystopian it felt to see John Chayka's name mentioned in this, to the point where I was thinking these are just like they got a list of 40 people, and maybe that list leaked to Elliot Friedman or someone, and Chayka, here's like 40 guys, and his was like at the very bottom that's saying like, if you really want to take a huge risk and go off the board, like maybe give this guy a call, but by all means do not hire him. And then Fried is like, yeah, I saw, even they were, John Chayka's name came up because he can, as Keith Pelly told us, they had 27 names in front of them.
Yeah.
At one point. So even just seeing that name like pop up in that sense, and then kind of, and at least initially being like, there's no way in hell that this guy is getting this job. Not only is it a job back in the NHL after he was found out to be a crook, but and everyone was like, "Yep, nope, no." There was nobody when that happened that was like, "This guy's being misunderstood," right?
Yeah.
There was none of that, and so to see that his name come up, it felt dystopian. Even like the way his name looks, right? Like Chayka. It just there's just something about it. The way he looks as well as like on camera.
Yeah.
It all felt
kind of
very
a creepy guy.
Yeah. very, very dystopian. And Steve Simmons was there to really just knock these out of the park because somebody had to do it. Like it really felt like somebody needed to just, Jonas and James and CJ, they're writing from an angle, not CJ as much. I don't want to lap CJ in with those two. CJ is a different kind of character in Master Leaf Theater. Like Jonas and James are coming from this as we're Maple Leafs fans with access, and this guy's, we know we can do a better job than this guy.
Yeah.
Kind of situation. Whereas like Steve Simmons is just like right to the point. There's no questioning like any of Steve Simmons' motives. He's just like, this guy is bad. Got to get him out of here. And that's where he comes at.
Yeah. And in fairness too, I mean, almost every market has a guy like this. Like we've had them in New York. We practically invented them here in New York, you know? Boston has had them, Philly, DC, Chicago, even like Edmonton and Vancouver, like places like that have had people like Steve Simmons that they're not fans with access. They're just guys that are going to call you out, and whether it's right or wrong. And sometimes they're in the wrong. The Phil Kessel thing was kind of really more silly than anything else. But in this case, he had this Chayka thing sort of pegged as really odd right from the get-go. And like, if this was a detective story, he would be like this sort of shaggy, almost unlikable detective. But all of a sudden he figures out that there's a crime and he's got to like kind of, suss out the details of it. And so we're going to read two articles back to back, and they're actually from a couple of days apart. The first one is called Matt Sundin and John Chayka would be hockey's newest odd couple running the Leafs. This is from the Toronto Sun on April 29th. We're going to get to Matt Sundin in a minute. Don't worry about it. And then he follows that up with Matt Sundin makes us happy. John Chayka makes us wonder, also from the Toronto Sun on May 3rd. So I'm going to start with the first one, and then I'll go right into the second one. So this is by Steve Simmons. Simmons writes, when he was general manager of the Arizona Coyotes, there were so many computer terminals on the giant-sized desk of numbers guru John Chayka that it looked like he was trading commodities on Wall Street. What was appearance, though, and what was indeed reality were two very different things. When Chayka was shown the door in Arizona in 2020, it was quickly determined that just one of the computer terminals on his massive desk was in working order. The other 5, with data frozen on each screen, were nothing but show. This is likely the new general manager of your Maple Leafs. He talks a better game than he plays. He has been more about style than substance. For a moment in time years ago, he was the boy wonder of the National Hockey League. And then, very quickly, piece by piece and season by season, he wasn't any longer. And now he appears to be the incoming GM of the Leafs at a pivotal point in the history of the franchise. An unusual hire at this most unusual time. And then the second excerpt, Matt Sundin makes us happy, John Chayka makes us wonder. Steve Simmons writes, Chayka has no Stanley Cups or Halls of Fame on his resume. He has been suspended by the NHL for conduct detrimental to the league. He cost the Arizona Coyotes 2 draft picks for essentially breaking the rules and believing he could get away with it. Many people in hockey think of Chayka as being something of a fraud, a fast talker, a handshaker, and a salesman of sorts but doesn't deliver much in the end. In Arizona, he was known for playing backroom politics, and there is a long list of reasonably credible hockey people who can't understand what the Leafs are thinking right now. How do they sell Chayka to a doubting fan base? They can soften his hiring by putting Matt Sundin in charge. Sundin has become a more beloved figure since leaving the Leafs and heading to retirement than he was when he played here. He was an exceptional Leaf, one of the 6 or 7 best players to ever suit up here in the modern era. But he's never had a management job in hockey before. Sundin makes us happy. Chayka makes us wonder. How does the second grandest franchise in hockey, the Montreal Canadiens again reign supreme on that list, wind up this way? These two pieces are a tour de force. And there's actually a third one that we're going to read later on that completes the trilogy. But this guy just has it out for Chayka. And again, you could complain about the methods. You can complain about his tone of voice. We're going to get to this week's press conference right after this. But ultimately, he's asking questions that if you are a Leafs fan, you should want answered.
Right.
Like, how is this the guy who's in charge? This is the guy you guys went with? Really?
I think that's perfectly put, right? That's exactly what I was going to say, which is Steve Simmons has become the voice of the Leafs fans during this insane part.
It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
Yeah. It's and that is not. He's definitely always thought he was doing that,
Right.
But like we said with like the Phil Kessel thing or other, some Austin Matthews stuff, when Austin Matthews would be like scoring 60 goals in a season, and Steve Simmons would be like, "This guy is not."
He's a bum.
Yeah, he's not Wendell. So
right.
But no, now he is, and honestly, you should be kind of grateful because you've got a guy like this, which brings us to a really important point to remind folks here, which is the Toronto Maple Leafs are owned by a strange corporate structure, but the principal owner is a guy, I think Edward Rogers, right? Edward Rogers is like the main guy, and they are owned by the company that owns Rogers Sportsnet, which is a huge part of Master Leaf Theater. And the people, some of the employees of Rogers Sportsnet also cover the Toronto Maple Leafs for Rogers Sportsnet on TV and on their digital properties, which makes it a little bit of a complicated thing when you have MLSE employees questioning other MLSE employees at a press conference. Now, this is important because Steve Simmons does not work for Rogers Sportsnet. He works for Toronto Sun, an independent of this kind of entity, right? So he can actually ask these questions without fear of, the backroom politics that he likes to say John Chayka was playing. And he does a really good job here. Like I'm saying this without irony or anything, right? Like, go get him. Like that's your job. That's Steve Simmons' job in a time like this is to go get him and to be that dog on a bone and not let this. John Chayka needs to go to bed thinking like, God, I hope I don't have to run into Steve Simmons tomorrow, right? Like, and this is an important role of journalists for the advent of media, and it's as you said, it's kind of dwindled, and these two excerpts are wonderful in what they are suggesting without saying it, which is Steve Simmons saying like this guy just conned.
He's a con artist.
He's a con artist. He just conned his way to the top of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He can't say it, right? Because that's implying like criminality, which is not the case. We don't think just yet. But like, he's essentially saying that without getting there. He's going right up to the line and he's not stepping over it. And he's right.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing here is like we all just watched the Toronto Maple Leafs, their CEO, Keith Pelly, and a group of, whoever else is involved. Ty Domi may or may not have been involved in the process. It depends on who you ask. If you ask Jonas Siegel, Ty Domi and John Chayka are chummy, and that's why John Chayka's in charge. If you ask Keith Pelly, that's not true, and he doesn't use AI at the trade deadline. Right. But we just watched a con job. We just watched it happen, unfold, and we watched it unfold in a strange way where it just was like released in like these very weird morsels of information, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, like they're doing it. Like 5-6 days ago, we knew that John Chayka and Matt Sundin were going to be running the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey operations one way or another. And then we just kind of sat and waited, and people obsessed about the org chart and who's going to report to who. And I honestly think that was a tactic by some Sportsnet people to be like, let's try to like swerve the conversation to this rather than the fact that we just watched the Leafs get, overtaken by a comment. You know what? Yeah. The name John Spano comes to mind a little bit. It's a bit different situation. Yeah. And I do think that like you can almost question John Chayka's like morals more than John Spano's in a way, which is like John Spano just like really wanted to own a hockey team, and John Chayka, I don't know of anybody who trusts him besides Keith Pelly and maybe Matt Sundin and Ty Domi. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, have you ever watched a complete con job unfold in real time, in real life, not a movie, in such a way? I haven't. And Steve Simmons is like, hey guys, we're all getting conned here.
and it's funny you mentioned Spano, because like in the unpacking of the Spano story, which has been done in books and documentaries and all kinds of different places, like you can read the through line as to how this happened. He had, made connections in the NHL, playing golf with Mario Lemieux, for example. He knew Roger Staubach, the former Cowboys quarterback. And so he had these sort of like tangential sports connections. He tried to buy the Florida Panthers at one point, tried to buy the Dallas Stars at one point. So his name kind of got into the NHL circles. Obviously, when the Islanders became available for sale by John Pickett, who was the owner, Gary Bettman, who was still fairly new, well, I guess he was like 5 years into his NHL career, wanted to save his hometown team, knew of a guy who was an Islanders fan, was from New York. This would be the perfect setup. He'd already kind of been through the process here with the Panthers and Stars. And so you can see how it came about. And then of course, it turns out Spano had no money, and the whole thing unraveled over the course of about a year or so. But the thing about this Chayka thing, and what makes Simmons kind of this unlikely, bell ringer or whatever, the Paul Revere of the Maple Leafs media, is like, it's almost like nobody knows where this came from. And nobody has any answers as to how they settled upon Chayka as the guy. Again, this guy's been out of the league for six years.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? And I'm going to talk about him again in a minute, but like, a lot of this reminded me of two other, not even Spano, but like the Garth Snow thing, and then the immediate committee situation that preceded Garth. We're going to get to that in a minute, but like, when Snow was given the general manager position with the Islanders, it was obviously incredibly strange and very unusual. But one of the biggest things he had going for him was like, well, this guy literally just played in the league. So he does know everybody. He's either faced everybody as a goalie, or has been teammates with them, or has watched them play from the bench, right? So like, in a way, that's the best scouting you can do, right? All these guys pretty, but like, what has Chayka been doing for 6 years? He's been running Wendy's. And listen, I'm a lover of fast food, so no shade there, but that's not being a general manager or even a scout. That's a funny thing. Even after leaving Colorado, Arizona, he never got a job as a scout or an assistant GM or anything like that. So he's been out of the NHL for 6 years. And how did he get the job? Like the Sundin thing, we're not going to talk that much about Sundin. Obviously, he's kind of a side player here. We all get it. Every team hires their former glory guys, and Sundin is no different. It was only a matter of time before they brought some old Leaf back into the fold. It's really not a big deal. The Islanders have done it. Everybody's done it. But like, how he got kind of here with this guy who he may know, may not know, I don't know, is just bizarre. And that brings us to this week's press conference, where Chayka and Sundin were introduced as the Leafs' new brain trust, along with Keith Pelly, who ran the presser. And this is the bit you heard up front, where Simmons basically does exactly what you just said. He says he's heard this guy's a con artist. He's a scam artist. This is all flim flam. I think he might, something like that, and like, this went a little bit viral because this is the kind of question that everybody's asking, and B, it came from a very, very unlikely source. And then the thing is, the answer isn't an answer. Pelly's like, well, I talked to different people than you did. That's the answer you gave? And like, Simmons is like, that's it? He's like, yeah. This has not gone well. And like, there needs to be, again, I'm saying this. I know I am a hater. I am a guy who wants to see this team fail. If I was a Leafs fan, I would be asking the same exact questions that Steve Simmons is asking right now. And as much as that may pain me, this is the guy who Brian Burke on his way out the door said, the best thing about leaving this job is I won't have to talk to you anymore, Steve. Like that's the kind of reputation this guy has. These are the questions that people should be asking. And here's a guy asking it and he's getting a non-answer. That would infuriate me. And it did. A lot of people ended up on Steve's side that didn't expect him to be there. But the presser is already legendary. Again, we heard a bit of it off the top. We can, probably just set that to music and make that a Master Leaf Theater. But what were your thoughts on it? I mean, how many times have you watched the video of Simmons getting into it with these guys?
Just an all-time moment. Just watching it, I was able to get it to have an eye on it live, and after that happened, I had to rewind because I was like, I'm watching on the Leafs YouTube, and I go back and I'm like, did that? I must have heard that wrong. I must have like maybe like he was trying to like give John Chayka the chance to say like, hey, you've been called these things. What do you have to say to people? And I listened to it the second time and I saw the comments and underwords and people were like, oh, Steve Simmons GOAT, like, like all sorts of stuff like that. And I realized like, oh shit, no, he's like coming at Keith Pelly. I said to you, I've said that like the metaphor to me is Steve Simmons went into that press conference at the real Sports Bar and Grill, which is just such an amazing name for all this too, right? Like
supposed to fake Sports Bar and Grill.
Hey, Keith Pelly. Oh, what are we gonna call the new sports bar we're gonna open up on MLSE property? Real Sports Bar and Grill. That'll get him. You couldn't have named it like Carlton's or something,
right? Yeah. Seriously, Wendell's. I don't know.
Yeah, Wendell's, anything. But Steve Simmons went into the Real Sports Bar and Grill, and he looked at this as if in the same vein as somebody who was going to the town hall or their city hall meeting, zoning board meeting, and the railroad was in town, and they're like, hey, we're knocking down your house and there's nothing you could do about it. And Steve Simmons is the one being like calling them to task, and that's what it felt like. That I've used to cover. I used to work for a paper in Rockaway, Queens, and I've heard that tone of voice. The microphone gets to you, and Steve Simmons is polished at this, but even him, you can hear like the nervousness in him because he's like, I'm just gonna unload here. I'm gonna unload. He did, as you said, like Keith Pelly couldn't have answered that in a more corporate,
obnoxious,
way, like that. Well, I talked to different people than you, and then Simmons was like, the hockey world is astounded right. today about all this. And if you have to watch it if you haven't. And I know we're all busy. I know it. I know it's hard to take time to watch a press conference of the hockey team you don't watch, but you need to watch it, and you need to watch it a few times because you have to watch the reaction of John Chayka as well. He's like got this, like, as I said, he's just like this weird slithery character, to the point where he's very robotic, and he might be AI generated or something. But if you watch him, you can see him throughout the press conference, like almost talking to himself, saying like, sit like a normal person. How would a normal person sit? Like he doesn't even know how to sit like a normal person during these things.
Yeah.
During this interchange, Chayka is like, his eyebrows raise at one point, just like a little bit, and then he just starts smirking. And it's giving me, dystopian vibes once again. And, it's incredible. And then the next question that comes up is from Rosie DiMano, who's like, sort of like the poor man Steve Simmons in a way. Like right. she's not a shrinking violet herself. She's just not as well known outside of the market. And she just goes, hi, I'm Rosie DiMano, and I'm confused.
Rosie.
Hi, Rosie DiMano from the Toronto Star, and I'm confused. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think either of these gentlemen have been given the title head of hockey operations. Is that correct?
John is the general manager of hockey operations.
Okay. So I'm not sure which of these men is senior, and how the organization will work, who
Sure.
reports to you,
Sure.
who makes the final decision.
Yeah, and again, Rosie is not a really likable character amongst Leafs fans, and I totally get it, but she has another good question too, which is like, what is the actual structure here? Like, what is everybody's job? Like, yeah, Chayka is the GM, but Sundin ends up with a really bizarre title that is, I think, special advisor to hockey operations, and Chayka is GM of hockey operations, I believe is what Pelly called him. None of these things make any sense. And they were asked later by Elliot Friedman on a piece for Sportsnet, like, what if, how are these decisions going to be made? And he's going, well, Chayka's like, oh, it's going to be a collaboration. And it's like, well, what if Matz thinks you have a bad idea? And then Chayka said, well, then we won't do it. And it's just like, none of this is very structured or normal. And this is where, I mentioned the Garth Snow thing before, but this is where I had flashbacks of something you and I have talked about a number of times. And I interviewed Neil Smith for Weird Islanders, the podcast, about this. The Islanders tried the committee back in 2006. It was owner Charles Wang at the top. It was Neil Smith as general manager, Ted Nolan, who was the coach, and then two special advisors who were Brian Trottier and Pat LaFontaine. And these are five smart guys. No, Wang didn't know anything about hockey, but between Smith, Nolan, LaFontaine, and Trottier, those guys have forgotten more about hockey than we will ever know. And they all had connections. LaFontaine had played for Nolan. He obviously was teammates with Trottier. Trottier knew Smith when he was, a scout and a prospect for the Islanders. I think Smith had actually acquired LaFontaine when he was still Rangers GM. So, all these guys had all these connections, and they all had the smarts and the know-how and all these different avenues. And it did not last to the season. 40 days after all that was set up, Neil Smith was fired. Trottier quit. LaFontaine quit. Nolan was still there, and Garth Snow was landed as GM. So, what Smith told me at the time was he didn't know that this was what Charles wanted to do. And if he had, he wouldn't have taken the job, because you can't run an NHL team by committee. There's got to be one person at the top making decisions and executing their vision of the team. That's usually the general manager. Maybe it's team president or something like that, like the Leafs had with Brendan Shanahan, but he was in lockstep with their general manager. And so I'm watching this and thinking so we don't really know what their titles are, what's even going on. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh boy, this is, I'm telling you right now, before the start of next season, I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of these guys isn't with the team anymore. I've seen this happen, and in 40 days it flamed out. It doesn't really work. You think you're doing something unique, but really you're just handcuffing your own team for really no reason.
And when you watch it, Pelly couldn't even just say yeah, John's the general manager, right?
Right.
He the first time I've ever heard anyone referred to as the general manager of hockey operations.
Okay, so I didn't mishear that then.
No, he said, I think he said it twice, and nobody was like,
what
the hell?
What is that? That's nothing.
Yeah, what? Has that always been a parentheses that none of us have ever picked up on in all the years of watching hockey? And you can tell, this is a guy, Keith Pelly, that is, who has, he is, as a human being, I fly by the seat of my pants. It's just one of my default settings. I don't really, it's a shortcoming sometimes, a lot of times, and other times it works out in my favor, that I just, that's just how I go into. I don't try to stress about things that I don't, beforehand and stuff like that. That said, it's very obvious when you are flying by the seat of your pants and you're doing it in a realm that you have no idea about. If tomorrow my life depended on passing an entry level chemistry exam, I would study for it, right? And this is because I don't know A from B when it comes to chemistry, and Keith Pelly doesn't know A from B when it comes to running a hockey team. But this is a man who is he is flying by the seat of his pants and has convinced himself that not only do I know what it's like to run a hockey team, because I was in the trade deadline war room with my AI co-pilot, this is easy. This is easy. This is easy stuff. I've got this under control. No, he's the general. He said it with such assuredness. He's the general manager of hockey operations, and he said something bizarre like, "Yeah, Matt's we didn't even like give Matt's a title until the very end." And is that fair, Matt's? And Sundin's just like, "Yeah, that's okay." And throughout the press conference, like Chayka and Sundin were like, "Yeah, no, that's true. I'm 100%. I'm on board with that." After Pelly would say something crazy.
Right. And Pelly also said these two guys don't care about titles. They didn't even ask what their titles were. They're all about winning. And it's like, okay, that's great, but like ultimately you have to know who's working for what. And like Sundin is not above Chayka. They're kind of the same, but they both report to Pelly. And then it sounded for a while that like only Chayka was reporting to Pelly. So the whole thing is very nebulous and crazy. And it did not, as Myrtle said on his own podcast, it just led to more questions than answers.
Get business done with the new American Express Graphite Business Cash Unlimited card. With unlimited 2% cash back on all eligible purchases. Unlimited 5% cash back on flights and prepaid hotels booked through American Express Travel Online. And a flexible spending capacity that can grow with your business. You'll have the confidence to keep building. Apply today and earn a welcome offer of $1,500 cash back after you spend $50,000 in qualifying purchases on your new card within the first 6 months of card membership. Terms apply. Learn more at go.amex/graphite.
Are your ad campaigns lighting up the dashboard, but not the pipeline? That's bull spend, and marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
My boss asked for results, so I opened my dashboard for the only positive-sounding metric I had, impressions.
Cut the bull spend. See revenue, not just reach. LinkedIn delivers the highest return on ad spend of major ad networks. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
This spring, Uber Eats has you covered. Whether you're celebrating mom, dad, or your favorite grad, not all of us are great planners, and with the Uber Eats gift hub, you don't have to be. Send flowers, perfume, champagne, or just their favorite meal straight to their door. Gifts arrive in as little as 25 minutes, and you can add a personalized video message for that additional so-not-last-minute touch. So this spring, get a leg up on gift giving with Uber Eats. Last-minute gifts that land every time. Must be 21 or older to purchase alcohol. Product availability varies per region. See app for details.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by Beneful. Mornings are when the grind starts. Stretches, immaculate. Cardio, crushed it. Territory, marked. Sorry, geraniums. The dog routine is on point, but it can get a little wolf. That's why I fuel up with high-protein, Beneful freshly prepared meals. I'm eating clean with real meat and veggies, served fresh from the pantry. Kick boring in the bowl with Beneful freshly prepared meals. Visit Purina.com/Beneful to shop now.
Well, we need to get back to our Master Leaf Theater readings here. And we're going to, because this presser sent shockwaves throughout Maple Leafs fandom, the press corps especially. And so here is Jonas Siegel asking, again, the main question as to what the heck they just watched. And this is also from The Athletic on May 4th, and it's titled, "The Maple Leafs Struggle to Answer the Question of the Day. Why?" The big question of the day was why? Why did Keith Pelly and ownership decide on John Chayka to lead the Toronto Maple Leafs front office with help in a supporting role from Matt Sundin? The question wasn't sufficiently answered. Chayka and Sundin's introduction as the new general manager and their senior advisor to the Leafs, respectively, at the Real Sports Bar and Grill on Monday afternoon had a bizarre and uncomfortable feel. The team tried to make things celebratory. They sat popular figures from the past, Wendell Clark, Doug Gilmour, and Darcy Tucker, in reserved front row seats and had Chayka's young family on hand, the kids in blue Leafs jerseys with the family name on the back. This also doesn't mention that Pelly opened with talking about the greatness of the Toronto Raptors and what a wonderful season they had. It was really, really bizarre. Why don't you take the second part here? Because, again, it gets to a very strange section of the press conference that got no answers whatsoever from the people on the podium.
Asked directly why Chayka's messy exit from Arizona, from his resignation to forfeited draft picks in the wake of that exit to a suspension from the league in 2021, weren't red flags in his hiring, Pelly offered few details in pointing to the diligence MLSE had done. We've done extensive due diligence, and I'm very comfortable and very confident in where we landed, he said. Pelly said he had read, quote, all of the reports, unquote, and talked to, quote, numerous people, unquote, about Chayka and his background, declining to say who he spoke with. He was also unbothered by the more than 5 years Chayka had spent outside the NHL, even when it was suggested that it might negatively affect his knowledge of the league today. There is still no concern for me, Pelly said. He knows the players in the league.
Wow. He knows the players in the league. Wow. I mean, so do you?
So does him. Yeah.
So do I.
He
So
even
do a lot
knows
of
the
people listening to
prospects.
this.
He knew the
Yeah.
prospects too. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And there were no answers. Again, people wanted to know why this guy. And he never gave an answer. It was just like, I believe in John. Oh, and he said the word due diligence.
Oh my God.
Like 50 times.
Yes.
And which again is not an answer.
Extensive due diligence. Well, due diligence in itself is extensive. Like that's the whole point of the phrase. It's like,
I know
you don't need to say that. Yeah. Like,
right.
We might have left a few stones unturned in our due diligence.
Right. Like, just tell us why this guy, why this person out of mothballs is the best guy. He has a plan. He's this, that, and the other thing. Like, none of that stuff really came up. And then when they asked Chayka, like, what do you think about the Leafs? He's like, well, we got to get better on the back end. Okay. That's literally, again, every team in the league needs to be better, except for the Avalanche, right? Like, and even then, sometimes Brent Burns does, like, he kind of, his controller gets disconnected, but still, they have the best back line in the league. And, so the whole thing was bizarre. And Jonas is right. Like, why him? And none of it made any sense. I'm trying to be kind about this, but like, he gives off a very sort of off-putting vibe. I think it's a little Patrick Bateman, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
American Psycho a little bit. Like, he's not like kind of a loose kind of reassuring guy. I mean, listen, we can criticize Matthew Darsh all day long, but if you hear him on a podcast or something, he's a pretty engaging guy. He's funny. He has like jokes. He's got a great accent. Like, you could like sit down and have a beer with Matthew Darsh and it's probably like fine, right? I mean, Garth Snow was the king of this, right? Garth seemed like a guy to sit and have a beer with. John Chayka does not look like one of those guys. And the fact that they got no answers from this man at all, or from his boss, or from his coworker, was really insane. I mean, Sundin, again, we're giving him a pass because he was fine. Like, he came off just as like Matt Sundin. Like, he's just there. He wants to get to work and make the Leafs great. But the other two guys, I mean, Pelly really came off worse than everybody else because he was combative. He was dismissive. He was everything you don't want in a press conference where you explain to the press why you've made these decisions. If he was going to be like that, why call the presser at all? Like, just stay home. But all of this gets to, again, the question is, why Chayka? Why this guy who has so many red flags and so many, strike marks in his ledger? Why him? And even if you just ignore all that, he's the guy in charge now, and their Leafs are going to have to live with it. And so here comes Jonas's podcast partner, James Myrtle, also at The Athletic, from May 5th, which was today. And he has an article titled, John Chayka has a divisive reputation. Can he and the Maple Leafs overcome it? It makes one wonder why this Chayka situation is unique. Why is he, in particular, so polarizing in a league where underperforming retread executives are recycled every offseason? To me, this whole situation is a perfect storm. One where multiple factors, including some that have little to do with Chayka's past, are at play. There's the Leafs' historic plummet down the standings this season, combined with Pelly coming in as the new face of ownership, and the stories about dysfunction behind the scenes. Partially written by James Myrtle, by the way. When you layer in Chayka's background as the NHL's youngest GM ever, during a tenure in Arizona that went sideways on the ice and off, in more ways than one, plus his suspension, followed by a long tenure out of the league, the way Chayka reportedly treated Shane Doan at the end of his career is another frequent criticism you hear. Many who were around the Coyotes at the time, believed Chayka wouldn't get another opportunity with an NHL team given all that went on. Quote, "Everyone's pretty shocked," said Craig Morgan, an Arizona-based sports writer who covered Chayka's time there for The Athletic. "I thought he might be blackballed." Craig Morgan, by the way, is the guy who covered the Coyotes stem to stern the entire time they were there. This poor man probably spent so much more time at town hall meetings than he did in NHL games, right? And if he is thinking that Chayka was going to get blackballed, I promise you, there was a chance this guy was going to get blackballed. Like, he is about as trustworthy as it is when it comes to this stuff. But still, it's just so funny that, like, this is the guy. This guy has so many red flags. And like, what's funny to me is Myrtle's like, how come all these retreads get jobs and this guy hadn't? There's a reason those retreads get jobs. It's because we can explain their screw ups. Like, these screw ups can't be explained. Oh, that guy made a bunch of bad trades and now we got another job. Yeah, well, he's friends with a bunch of guys, so we got another job. This guy's mistakes are bizarre and insane. Like, it's just, that's why the retreads keep getting jobs, because you can explain them away, and they've done the job before. This guy, you can argue, technically he did the job before, but did he though? Because it doesn't sound like he really did.
And as we were talking about Garth, and I mean, hell, we can even Kyle Dubas, we could throw in there too, right? They tick a lot of boxes of human beings, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how many of the boxes John Chayka ticks, like, which is crazy to say about somebody, just anybody. But when that person is now one of the most powerful people in the NHL, you could see why these writers who, we spend a lot of time making fun of these writers because of how ham-fisted and hyperbolic and just crazy they write. They take every little twist and turn when it comes to Toronto Maple Leafs. Something as simple as when they signed Aaron Dell as like their third goalie. James Myrtle was talking about how important this was, and Josh Cloak is regularly on assignment, in the backyards of the Leafs' 5th round draft pick, and he's getting paid to do it as one of the 8 or 9 people who cover this team. And Jonas, Luke Fox, like all these guys, they write these insane flowery passages about this team, about the most mundane stuff, about how long Fraser Minton stays on the ice after practices, only to have these players prove themselves to like not even be a part of the story. They just wasted all that time and effort on it. But in this case, like, the stuff they are writing about, it's crazy. Like, this is an absolutely bizarre story. So the reaction and the tone actually meets the moment. And it's a little boy who cried wolf, because I'm like, I've read these same kind of paragraphs and leads from you guys when you're talking about something as simple as like, Craig Berube not wanting to try William Nylander at center again, and how it's like he needs to be tried in front of like a war crimes panel for in this case, like I said, it meets the moment. And Chayka and Pelly have just turned into this incredibly evil duo, where you got Pelly, who, that moment with Gino Reda, which Jonas Siegel closed that last excerpt with, where he's like, he knows the players in the league.
Yeah.
Like, Gino Reda asked him basically, is it concerning that he's been out of the league for so long? And that was the answer. And he like followed it up. And that's when Pelly said, Reda had the microphone taken from him. And he's like, that you didn't like answer, like, why? And he's like, he knows the players in the league. Like, that in itself, had Steve Simmons not trumped that moment, that was already, to me, like an incredibly great moment. Like, I'm standing up clapping for Gino Reda moment. And then, and we're going to get to another thing too. So like, the situation gets weirder and weirder. Like the press conference got weirder and weirder. And so does Chayka.
Yeah.
And as Myrtle's kind of outlining in this, and the next passage, we're going to really drive home this point. But as he's like laying this all out, saying, not only did this guy, like, was he a bad GM at like being a GM, like transactions and making your hockey team win games, like that alone is enough to be skeptical of somebody being hired as your team's GM. But then you added the fact that was suspended, he was tampering with like another team while he was the GM of the league, he stabbed Shane Doan in the back. He was suspended and then disappeared because, like Craig Morgan, I think John Chayka was like, "Oh, I'm just, I had my shot. I lost. I'm gonna go make money being the sir. This is a Wendy's meme, right?" Like the fact that everybody here thought that this guy was so far off everybody's radar because, and I'm sure the Toronto Maple Leafs job was off of Chayka's radar because it should be, is why we're all here talking about this, which is like, this is the equivalent of going into a sports bar, like an actual sports bar, not the real sports bar and grill, like going into a downtown sports bar in, I don't know, Brampton, Ontario on a Tuesday night when the Leafs are playing and hiring somebody who you heard said like a good idea. Like, oh, they should trade Matthews for Connor McDavid, and Keith Pelly being like, we got to get this guy. Except that is easier to explain than this. Like, like this is so hard to explain. These guys are so confused by it all. And I mean, it's I've been smiling ear to ear, bar the thing that happened with the draft lottery. I've been because I'm watching these guys just the word Steve Simmons used, be astounded.
Yeah.
Over these past few days has been incredible. And we also haven't mentioned that, Jonas and James, especially, they come at the game from like a very analytics, data heavy, friendly place. Like they basically want their friend Dom to be running the Leafs. They loved Kyle Dubas because he was
one of them. Basically.
One of them, right? Yeah. Right, yeah. And John Chayka came into the league with that reputation. So the fact that these guys are so mad with that the Leafs are hiring a quote progressive, like analytics driven guy really shows you just how far this guy must have gone off the deep end for them to be like, no, he's got no redeeming qualities.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's, I don't know. I don't want to keep using the word bizarre, but I'm glad you mentioned the lottery again, because I was just thinking like, now that it's going to be a few days, because obviously they're going to be like, soaking this in, but like, I wonder if they are going to get back to the idea that like, wait, how did this guy get the job? Because they're not going to get any answers from this. Like, they're going to have to like start pushing Keith Pelly in ways that he doesn't want to get pushed in order to figure out how Chayka got the job. Like you mentioned before, like Pelly said that they had 27 different candidates come in, and still this is the guy you picked. None of those other guys make any sense. The guys who are working in the league currently somehow didn't rise to the level of what the Leafs were looking for. So I hope that the lottery win doesn't, kind of throw these guys off the scent of like what's actually happening here. But you mentioned it before. We got just a couple of things left here. And there was another writer here who was in attendance at this press conference that really took this in a direction that we could appreciate. And it's Cathal Kelly of the Toronto Globe and Mail, which honestly I had completely forgotten existed, as I did forget Cathal Kelly. He only writes about the Leafs like maybe 4 or 5 times a year, at least to my knowledge anyway. He doesn't come up as much as he used to. But this is a great snippet here that you sent me, and I'm like, oh my God, that's got to go. I didn't even realize he had done this, but this is great. And again, it gets to, I know we keep hammering it, but like the incredible like sort of bizarreness of this whole situation. And it's almost like, again, it's like a story. Like, where did this guy come from? Only it's a very weird story that maybe people aren't like much like the talented Mr. Ripley. But it's called John Chayka's Tenure with the Maple Leafs Begins Under Intense Scrutiny by Cathal Kelly. And I would love for you to read this because this was your findings. So I want to hear you.
Yeah, I mean, this was sent to me, and I read it, and it really drives home a point that we've been kind of poking and dancing around, and Steve Simmons has been kind of poking and dancing around. And you want to be careful with the language you use to describe somebody, a fellow human being. So we're doing that. But yeah, this passage really makes me question even that. So take it away, Cathal. Who I think has featured on Master Leaf Theater before. So he's got
at least once.
Yeah, decent hit rate for someone who doesn't really, rub elbows with the CJs and Luke Foxes of the world. When I put it to him that Toronto is the Moby Dick of the NHL, it has lured many sailors to their death, and that he could have gone to Columbus instead, Chayka bristled. I think there's a bit of a misconception, to be honest with you. I've been contacted on every GM availability since I left Arizona. Maybe 90%. Honestly, some of them I didn't even interview on. It just wasn't the right fit at the right time for me. Some of them I engaged tepidly. Nothing did I take as seriously as being the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Chayka said. I appreciate the Moby Dick analogy, but I have no fear of failure. Okay, so why this and why now? Why? That's the right question. It's important for me to give back to my community. I've done a lot of philanthropic work. We donate a lot to hospitals. We donate to our alma mater. I think there's nothing that I could do that would give back to this community more than win the Stanley Cup. I think that's the craziest thing I've ever heard from a sports person in my entire life.
This has big oh no, I've got a girlfriend. She lives in Canada and she's really hot. Like, were you really? So this guy has been contacted on every GM availability since 2020.
Maybe 90%.
Maybe 90%. And at no point has his name ever leaked on any of them. We literally a year ago, the Islanders just went through the whole process and we had 4 or 5 names come out. Ken Holland, whatever was the first one. Mark Bergevin, Jarmo Kekalainen. Eventually it was Matthew Darche. It might have been another couple of guys in there as well. I mean, were they part of the 10% that he didn't want?
Yeah.
Maybe again, these jobs open every year. And at no point was John Chayka a name associated with any of them. So I'm frankly calling BS on this every GM opening thing since 2020. It doesn't make any sense. What?
I really appreciate that this was verbatim, like it was jotted down verbatim, because you could see his kind of spiraling in this and the next passage, which is like, I've been contacted on every GM availability since I left Arizona. Maybe 90%. Honestly, actually, I didn't even interview on any of them, on some of them. And then I love that he wraps it up with, I appreciate the Moby Dick analogy, but I have no fear of failure, because he's like, well, what does the little sign above my fake computer terminal say on my office? No, don't fear failure.
Right.
And then, so just like the Gino Reda, Steve Simmons thing, just like this entire story, even this article, it gets even more strange. You think, okay, that's one of the weirdest things I've ever read. John Chayka is just lying to us, saying that he's essentially, GM jobs just fall into this guy's lap all the time. People just can't stop calling this guy to be the GM of hockey teams. And then but then he makes it even crazier by saying that he's actually doing this out of the kindness of his heart. I donate a lot of money to hospitals, and I'm the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. What are you? Wait, what? This is actually a philanthropic pursuit of yours? You are doing this for charity? You're such a good person that you're going to be the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah,
I think that is one of the strangest, weirdest, out of left field things I've ever come across in sports. I've never heard someone get hired. And by the way, we should note that, and I think CJ noted this during one of his stand-up things, this is supposed to be a celebratory thing, a new era, especially with Sundin there. People are supposed to be happy. And I've never read anybody come into a job like this, whether they were even buying a team, rescuing a team from bankruptcy to keep it in the community. I've never heard them say I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart because I'm the best.
Yeah.
Which is what he's getting at here, which is crazy.
Yeah. I know. I've never heard of a guy taking over as GM out of a sense of philanthropy. That doesn't.
Yeah.
What? I'm trying to give back.
Did Mike Greer say well, I'm done donating to hospitals, so now I just want to be the, I think the next step of my pursuit of happiness and nirvana is to be the GM of the San Jose Sharks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe some if you're hiring Jose Andres as your GM, then he's I'm done cooking food for all these people in these, disaster stricken areas. Now I'm coming to become the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's one thing, but it just I'm glad you said that too. These two quotes, I think again, just add to the kind of person that Chayka comes off as. And listen, we don't know the guy. Maybe we can't tell the future. Maybe this all works out and he's learned a lot and, he's the different kind of general manager than he was before. But like both of these quotes together, and thank you very much, Cathal Kelly, certainly sound like a guy trying to con his way into a job. Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been interviewed for all these jobs, but I didn't want those. I was waiting for this one. And I thought I'm taking the job to give back to my community, not because it's paying me, $1 million a year, whatever it is. And it's the Leafs, my hometown. So it's again, incredibly weird. And, the fact that Kelly captures, I think that might've been in a one-on-one interview situation. So that wasn't part of the presser, but we have to finish here though, with once again, our crusading hero, the one and only Steve Simmons, who, again, it needs to be said, was at the forefront of questioning this, continued to question it, got right up into Keith Pelley and John Chayka's face in the press conference. I mean, it takes a lot to say that, a man has been called a scam artist in front of his kids, which I don't know how old the kids are, but I don't know if they understand that phrase. But he does not see any sort of, path here. And his column on May 4th, which was the day of the press conference, is titled "The Confusing and Confounding Leafs Hiring of John Chayka and Matt Sundin." And here's where he tries to kind of explain how Chayka got the job, because again, he's, on the case here, but even then just doesn't quite get it. And so Steve writes, "Let's see if we can follow the moving parts here. It's complicated. Pelley said he picked Chayka to be general manager after doing the appropriate due diligence. Due diligence that noted hockey commentator Ray Ferraro said, quote, he couldn't be more stunned by. This is where the Leafs have landed? With a giant question mark at the end of that sentence. Pelley, the story goes, hired Chayka. But Chayka apparently told two hockey agents on the weekend that he was hired by corporate head and future owner Edward Rogers, not by Pelley. The truth, of course, is somewhere in the middle. And it sheds some dubious light on Pelley's time as CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. On the same weekend, Chayka was telling agents about how he got to the Leafs. He also heard from the Leafs via the National Hockey League front office. The league didn't come right out and accuse Chayka of tampering and trying to put his staff in Toronto. But they did remind the Leafs and Chayka what the rules were on tampering and that it's best this time to cease and desist. Chayka is the general manager and basically he's in charge of the Leafs. Sundin has a fancy title, Senior Executive Director of Hockey Operations. Exactly what that means wasn't answered at the news conference Monday, where much remains in question. Steve is trying to piece together how Chayka got the job. It says that a bunch of different people heard he got the job from a bunch of different places, and even Chayka said that he got the job from Edward Rogers, not from Pelley. The league calls them and says, hey, we heard you might be calling some people who already have jobs to get them on your staff. Don't do that because that could be tampering. And the guy barely even has the job yet. So all of this, again, there's no explanation here, but Steve is trying to pull at these threads and hoping that something comes out that makes sense. And he's just not getting there. And it's very funny to watch this continue to happen. But I just love that he's so trying to follow the money or trying to follow the clues. And it keeps leading to different dead ends. It's crazy.
The fact that a guy who was suspended and essentially exiled for tampering, with the Devils, as part of his kind of package of punishment, on day one gets slapped with a, hey, you're getting close to tampering and it gets out. It's just unbelievable. It happened before the press conference. I think it was 37-year-old Frank Saravalli who had the scoop that Chayka was getting a stern phone call from the rule makers, like, hey, you can't break the rules. You're coming close to breaking the rules. And once again, it's just another bit of the story that gets weirder and weirder the more you dive into it. And as you said, Steve Simmons is just saying, he's just telling the story. He's just telling the story. And you can almost read as he's into it, as he's writing it, being like, he can't believe what he's writing and what he's being told. And he's writing it and laying it all out. And it's incredibly, it's hard. It's just hard to wrap your mind around it. This is, as we keep saying, like, it's how if the Leafs had brought John Chayka in to be like their head of analytics, let's say, right? Not the GM, I think people would be like, probably not what I would do. You know, you don't want this guy involved. He could like kind of poison the well sort of situation. And everyone would just kind of go about their day because he's not the guy running the show. But no, he's running the show, which is why the fact that we almost are overlooking that he's been out of the league for 5 years because everything else is so much stranger. It's so hard. It's just so hard to wrap your head around it. And you can see that and you can feel it from the way Steve Simmons is writing. And he really just does a great job. Oh my goodness. And I'm just really grateful for that he's been on the case and was here. He really did nail it.
In the grand tradition of great literary detectives, Poirot, Columbo, like all these great, you know, I can imagine Steve Simmons is going to be wearing a trench coat and like following John Chayka along. And he's going to be like, I know something about you. Hey, whoa. Excuse me, one more question, please. You know, and he's going to turn into Peter Falk over time, you know, because he just wants to know. And you know, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record. We're about to end here with our last final bit that you're going to read here. But this whole thing, and again, we started talking about the draft, and the Leafs are going to be very excited about this. I'm sure they have every reason to be. But ultimately, this team right now is being run by one of the great Maple Leafs of all time, who has never worked in a National Hockey League front office, a general manager who has not been in the league for 6 years and was basically quit and then still dogged by accusations right up until the point where, you know, both after he left his previous job and right up to the point where he got this current job, and a suit. I mean, he's a CEO that doesn't seem to understand what the whole purpose of all this is. And like the environment that he is in right now, it makes for a very strange and rickety basis to build a hockey team on. And again, Austin Matthews is going to be a free agent in 2 years. They failed spectacularly this year because the depth in the team and the defense just wasn't good enough. Like, I'm sure they're going to get a great player this year's draft, but to what end? I have a friend who writes for a Leafs blog, and he was wondering whether or not this makes them even more likely to trade Austin Matthews now. Because, like, you know, you could trade Matthews, get a bunch of younger players back, and then with whoever you take the first overall pick, whether it's McKenna or somebody else, now you're on a different timeline, you know, and then maybe, you know, you start to reset all over again. But I don't think that's what Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment wants to do. So all of this is still here. Like, getting the first overall pick doesn't negate any of this stuff. It's still all there. And like, John Chayka still has to be the general manager of this team and doesn't have any sort of basis for that whatsoever. And so I really hope that, you know, Steve continues to stay on the case and we trying to figure this out. I mean, it might end up with John Chayka just like, again, getting fired, like, like he did after 40 days. But it feels like that is a distinct possibility here. And on the draft, once again, like, we've outlined, we've read out loud Steve Simmons and this group of exemplary writers who are definitely not Leaf fans. They are just objective reporters. They outlined the situation that Gavin McKenna is going to walk into. Like, you don't think Gavin McKenna got text yesterday, like, from friends being like, boy, I hope you don't end up with this, you know, this in this circus. And he's probably like, yeah, man, like, that would be crazy. Good thing they only got like a 9% chance. Because I can't imagine a worse situation to walk into. Like, the culture is toxic. The GM is, we're unsure of his credentials as a human being. Like, the guy who's running the entire kind of company is completely
like out to lunch, like no clue what's going on whatsoever. I wouldn't be shocked if Keith Pelly literally has like another press conference this week to like talk about the draft lottery and how excited they are, because he thinks like he's got this all under control and is killing it at these press conferences where he's talking about Michael Hage and due diligence and that his new GM knows the players in the league. This guy, he knows the players. Like, so the situation that Gavin McKenna is walking into is insane. And look, this show is called Islanders Anxiety. And thank you for listening to it. I would be remiss if I didn't mention there is a little bit of me that is scared that with some of the stuff we've seen from the Islanders on like the business side this year, especially, like, I don't know. We're definitely not hiring John Chayka types, right? But like I don't know how far away we are from like the Keith Pelly of the world right now. Like how many like, degrees of removal there are.
The Islanders might have 3 Keith Pellys in their organization right now. Yeah, like exactly. Seriously.
Right. And so I do want to just note that and note that like there is a chance that, as we always say on this show, like it works out and this isn't funny and we just remove this podcast and pretend it never happened. Right. Like I get that it can happen, but especially, when you get a break, like winning the draft lottery, but the situation that this guy's walking into is going to be not just difficult in terms of the talent on the roster and the fact that they don't have 2 first-round picks the next couple of years. So like they can't really tank in like the classic sense to like build around McKenna or whoever. He's walking into a weird situation, not like a bad one like Connor Bedard did in Chicago where the team just stinks. It's like it's a weird one. So I'm trying my best not to worry about that for now and just enjoy what's to come. And I do think that, as you said, like Steve Simmons will keep pulling at these threads, Jonas, James. I do wonder if one of them, someone's going to stand up and write the Leafs won the draft lottery, but what is this person walking into to be like the Debbie Downer of the article? And it's coming and it'll be great. And I can't wait for it.
Yeah. Right. Neither can I. And again, we hope it all goes terribly, terribly awry, but why don't you bring it home with the end to this Steve Simmons piece from the May 4th. And again, highly recommend you go back and read these, put on some classical music. You can create your own Master Leaf Theater environment just right there in your home. The home version, it's like a board game version of Family Feud or whatever it is. But this is a lot of fun. We really do hope you've enjoyed this because we enjoy doing this. And I know we've said the word bizarre as many times as Keith Pelly said the words due diligence at this press conference, but it really is a very strange thing. And again, was worth noting. And we might have some more Master Leaf stuff later on this summer. You never know. We might have another team, Master Leaf Theater for another team coming up later on. We have to, kind of waiting on how a situation unfolds there. Well, hopefully we can put something there together, but this will be our final piece here. And it is the end to a great Steve Simmons column in a week of great Steve Simmons columns, which I can't believe I'm saying. So Mike, why don't you take this last bit here?
Yeah. And once again, thank you for listening. And as you said, we know that this is a strange bit. But we do always hear from people that they appreciate it. And I can't tell you how happy that makes me that we're not the only 2 people in the world that get as much joy out of these. Then we're not alone in this, which always really makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside and makes me feel like we're fighting the good fight. And speaking of, so is Steve Simmons right now, and we'll close it out with his prose. How do the Leafs get younger and faster from older and slower? You bring Berube back if you plan on bottoming next season, but Pelly doesn't believe in bottoming out, which puts Chayka and Sundin in an unusual position. Under Pelly, the Leafs want Chayka and Sundin to suck and blow. It's a challenging place to begin their Maple Leafs managerial careers together.
Suck and blow. That's what the plan is, I guess. Only Steve Simmons could turn that phrase. And
get away.
We want the Leafs to both suck and blow. That's for sure. But I don't know how that's going to work. And this has been a bizarre week. It got a little bit more bizarre today. And it's only Tuesday.
It's only Tuesday.
So,
these guys have plenty of runway and bullets left in the chamber.
Yeah.
It's great. And
right.
I mean, this is every, like I keep saying, like everything that got passed to me or that I watched, like it got better and better, and it just added. You know, there are like those albums and bands that people say are like growers.
Yeah.
You know, like they grow on you, or when someone recommends a TV show and they're like,
yeah,
the first episode is good, but you
gotta
like,
get like episode 5 is where it starts getting good.
Yeah. Like that's what this has felt like to me. It's just, and now it's become, you know, it's The Sopranos. This is you can't put it down. It's so good, right. And I can't tell you how excited I am for the next bit to come out, and for what Chayka does too. Yeah. Like I'm really excited for him to not so much as like the draft, but like the scouting combine's coming up. So he's gonna have to like talk to media again soon. And he's gonna be at the draft, and they're gonna obviously be front and center at the draft, and they've got to make these trades. And then there's the Austin Matthews things. I can't wait to see what he does. Yeah. And it's because it's only gonna get he's obviously doing it out of the kindness of his heart and a sense of charity. Right. And he's not afraid of failure. And he wants you to know that he knows about what Moby Dick is as well. He appreciated that, but he's going to he's only going to say more and more outlandish, like grotesque things. So I can't wait for it. And as I said, I use the word dystopian, and as dystopian as this whole thing has felt, I couldn't be happier to see the team that this is happening to. So I can't wait. I can't wait.
I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that we are going to get a long article at The Athletic about all of these things that we've been saying we don't know. Like somebody's going to come up with the answers, whether it's like Josh Cloak going through the garbage, or Chris Johnston calling in all of his contacts, or James and Jonas just sort of like moping their way to the answers. Is like at some point a dam will break and the answers will come out, and maybe it'll be Steve Simmons, maybe it won't. I don't know how long Chayka can avoid talking about what happened in Arizona and the suspensions and all the things that happened. I don't know how long Keith Pelly can just continue to not give a straight answer, like as the team's, CEO. Like at some point, somebody's going to have to say something. And this is where I think Matt Sundin comes in. They're just going to throw him out there because who doesn't love Matt Sundin? I mean, his team ran roughshod over the Islanders in one of the most brutal 7-game series in NHL history. And even I like Matt Sundin. Like he's just one of those guys. He's just a very likable dude. And, he's might be the reason that they can get away with this, because they're just going to keep throwing Matts out there, and whatever he says, we're like, okay, that's fine. But how long does he go before getting sick of that? So I don't know. We will have to see. Again, it's very funny that, we also mentioned here, and, you can paint us as haters. We are guilty as charged, but between John Spano, between the Neil Smith / committee debacle, and between Garth Snow, we have seen some bizarre situations with this team come about. And, they didn't end particularly well for any of this. Although, we got a couple of cool first round series out of it and things like that. But ultimately, long-term success did not happen until a couple of retreads showed up. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's how that's supposed to go. Oh, yeah, I see that now. Like when you hire Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz, you don't have to explain jack shit to anybody, right? Like they come with their own explanations. Like, okay, these guys make sense. So, reinventing the wheel doesn't often work in the NHL, but you never know. We'll see what happens. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as Garth Snow once said during one of the worst trade deadlines he ever had. So, Bill Guerin wasn't a trade. No, not Bill Guerin. That was Brian Rolston. Was not a trade deadline, but he still said it, and he wasn't wrong, but he was wrong in that situation. So I will say that. But anyway, thank you so much for sticking with us. This was a very long, epic Master Leaf Theater. We had a lot of fun. We are unfortunately in a world now where the Leafs have the first overall pick, but maybe they'll trade it for something stupid. Who knows? But we thank you for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a brand new episode of Islanders Anxiety. We'll be back next Friday with a brand new episode of Weird Islanders. Patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety for everything you could possibly want from us. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.